Exploring Chiropractic, episode 49, Placebo Effect in Manual Therapy with Brian Fulton. Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Exploring Chiropractic. I am your host, Dr. Nathan Cashin. My guest in this episode is Brian Fulton, a registered massage therapist in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. And Brian is the author of The Placebo Effect in Manual Therapy, which is a 290-page book that serves as a manual for manual therapists on harnessing the effect of placebo. And as we discuss in this episode, I've long been resistant to the idea of using placebo in any way, but this book has completely changed my perspective, and I especially appreciate the term contextual effects, which he uses to describe all of the different and various aspects of placebo. We discuss definitions, examples, all the different factors that come into play, and a little bit about how this book came together. As always, if you enjoyed this interview, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, or subscribe to my YouTube channel as well for future videos of interviews as well as product reviews and other thoughts and information that I'll be sharing about chiropractic. Well, hey, I'm excited to talk with you. Your book really changed my mindset as far as the placebo effect is concerned. And so I come from, more, an evidence-based background, more science-focused. And the idea of placebo to me was really anathema for so long. Like, anything that's placebo, just, set it aside and get rid of it because it's not worth it. And then I read your book. Sure. Yeah. Well,
okay, just checking. All right.
Yes, I like to jump into it when the conversation starts flowing.
Just need to know. Okay, no more cursing and swearing. I got you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, but then I read your book, and it just completely changed my perspective, and I began to understand the value of placebo. But I certainly have some. What's the word that I'm looking for?
Reservations.
Some reservations, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, based on. So I'm really excited to get into that. But I want the audience to get to know you. And I always love to start with when you were a little kid. What did you want to be when you grew up?
I had no idea. I honestly had no idea. I don't know how many kids do. Maybe some do, but I had one friend who knew he wanted to be a doctor, and bless his heart, he tied right into it, and I would love to have had that focus, but I never have. And honestly, even as an adult at this point, looking back in my life, I find myself interested in things, and then I kind of move on. Like even the placebo effect, I've really enjoyed. Like I've kind of moved on from that.
Oh, interesting.
But I get called back. Obviously because I get asked to do seminars and sometimes podcasts and et cetera, et cetera. So I get sort of back into it. But I find that a lot of times once I've ticked a box off, I think, okay, what do I do now? So I'm a little bit more of I have to admit, a butterfly. I'm not someone though I'd be the first to say it. When I went back to school for massage therapy, I was 42, and I just loved it. I ate it up. I was just so interested in what was going on in my own body as well as, other people's bodies. And it was just such an incredibly good fit, I felt, for my personality and my strengths. So I've been at that now for about 20 years as a massage therapist.
So what led you to go to massage therapy school?
Oh, geez, you won't believe this, but my girlfriend said to me one night, Brian, you ever thought of becoming a massage therapist? And so the next morning I said to her, well, I'm going to become a massage therapist. And she said, I think you should think. I did all night long. I ran everything through my head, and I already had a long list of things I didn't want to do. I knew my strengths and my weaknesses, and I'd already spent 20 years working, in the trades, and I wasn't sure what my next career was going to be. And it was just like tick, 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 tick. I said to her, yeah, I'm going to become a massage therapist. And she says, you should think about it.
What prompted that? Did you give her great shoulder rubs now and then? Or what was it about massage therapy that you thought would be such a great fit?
Well, I think I have to credit her something I hadn't recognized because I had never even had a massage before then.
Huh.
And I think she must have credited that maybe I had some strengths because she had received massage therapy. And as I say, I've always been very holistically oriented. Science was very strong in high school. I did quite well in the sciences and maths, and I've always liked one-on-one. And I sort of was, moving away from noisier environments. I mean, everything about it. I'll tell you, probably chiropractic is the same thing. Manual therapy in general, I would say it's your head, your heart, and your hands. Your head's the knowledge, your heart is the intuition and the intent, and then your hands. And it was almost like, for me, it's like being a child again, going back into that play-doh or playing in mud.
Hmm.
Is you're playing with people's bodies, and maybe that's a crass way of putting it, but it also means that it's fun and it's playful what we do as well as everything else. So I love the purity. My 40s were all about getting back to basics, down to its absolute core, and the simplicity of massage therapy really, and manual therapy in general, really drew me in.
Very interesting. Yeah, there's so much about it that I love for the same reasons that you mentioned. For me, it's the kind of the intertwining of anatomy and science and physiology, and then being able to work with your hands as well. Um, After you got into massage, what then triggered this curiosity and almost obsession about placebo?
Um, I had the fortune pretty early on in my career to become a staff health writer for a local magazine, and it's just like a community magazine, but distribution of maybe 20, 30,000 copies. And my editor was just the greatest guy. He's like, whatever you want to write about, Brian, just go right ahead and write about it. I never had to run anything past him. And I think I heard something on CBC at one point. Fascinating. I'd like to know more about what the placebo effect is. And then I just started digging into what it is, because on the one hand, it sounds like it's the mysterious thing, but when you dig into it, it's really it's quite understandable. It's basically, the social and component of the treatment. And you are basically tapping into these aspects. It's the interpersonal aspects of what's going on in every medical encounter. And so I actually, I had a 3-week holiday planned, and I didn't know what I was going to do. So I took 7 textbooks with me, and I started out, and I didn't even have internet at that point where I was renting. And I laid out the whole outline for my book at that point. Now, it took me 7 years to eventually get it together and written, but that was sort of is well more than an article. And I didn't know if it would ever be published, but I just started it with the idea of, I'm just going to do this just like I've done a few things in my life, and I'm just going to travel, see it out to the end and see what it becomes of it. But in the end, it did get published. I sent it off to Handspring, and they picked it. Asked um, one Leon Chatow, one of my heroes, if he'd write the foreword for me, and he said, "Sure, absolutely." So, the first person I asked to write the foreword said yes, and the first company who I asked to publish, pretty excited. I really couldn't have been luckier.
And had you written a book before this, or was this your
No,
first?
no,
Yeah,
no, no, no.
that's amazing. I mean, that's
Yeah,
just,
I know. Just
and it sounds
luck of
like
the Irish.
it really, it sounds like it really was more for your own benefit, more for your own curiosity to put all this information together. Um, but it's become a valuable resource for so many people now.
Yeah, and I don't know what writing books is for most people, but I think for in this case here, and for some people, it starts out with, oh, this is an interesting subject, bigger and bigger and bigger, and you realize
Hmm.
this is not an article. This is like way beyond an article, and at some point it just becomes a book.
Well, let's dive into it. So, can you define placebo effect for me?
I would say that placebo. Um, I realized that I didn't get myself a glass of water before this thing, so I might have to just take a break in a minute or two and get one.
Okay.
Um, a placebo effect might actually, I make a point of kind of putting things in a few different charts, and I would say, that in terms of what goes on, first off, there's a trigger, and that's what I would call a psychosocial trigger. That's something in your environment around that triggers something, and pattern. That thought pattern triggers something along a neurobiological pathway, and then that pathway eventually manifests some sort of an effect, which may be subjective and it may be objective. But it all starts with a thought. And the fact is, we know that our neural tissue reaches every other tissue in our body. It reaches everywhere, and there's really no systems that's not touched by our neurological system. So it's not a big surprise that it has an ability to affect change, modulate, and down modulation we tend to call the nocebo effect, and then upregulation would be the placebo effect. And the one, I don't think they're really a different thing. They are simply, one is the continuum. It's a continuous thing. And so if you get a fear reaction to something, you tend to have a nocebic reaction. And if you can calm your client down, you'll have a more positive reaction. And placebo, I would say, is just simply, I use the term placebo in my book simply because when I started looking into the National Library, there's way more information than you'll find under placebo than you'll find under contextual effects or non-specific effects or psychosocial triggers. There's a bunch of words that you can use, and these words are all just as valid as one another, in my opinion. I had to come up with a word, and I just chose placebo because I thought, A, it sounds a little mysterious, and B, there's actually way more research available under that medical subject heading than there is under any other medical subject heading.
And I think it's important to keep in mind that when we talk about placebo in the medical context, that oftentimes what's being referred to is, well, I should say more specifically in the pharmaceutical context, we're talking about an inert substance, right? So in a lot of studies, it's a sugar pill. And it seems to me that may be part of the reason that placebo is a little bit maligned, right? A lot of people, myself included, think that the placebo is something that should be discarded.
Yeah, and I would not argue against that. Certainly, I think that and I don't know if you have looked on or not, but certainly I also am involved in a page which looks at placebo effects in manual therapy on Facebook. And at times, that this is the wrong term, and I mean, I don't know what to tell these guys because, yeah, you're right, it is not the perfect term. My reasons that I can outline, or this is what I just said, is why I've used that term, and in no way do I endorse the idea of handing out placebos. It's just that we need to understand what these triggers are, and these are psychosocial triggers, or people will use the term contextual triggers, which is entirely accurate. So what we're just learning to do is to manage all these contextual effects. It's not about an inert pill, that's for sure.
And so I love that term, contextual effects. To me, that really clarified how this applies to manual therapy. So give me kind of a description or definition of contextual effects.
Contextual effects. Oh, geez, I wish I had all my books in front of me at the exact same time, because a fellow at Harvard who manages placebo studies at Harvard, me at the moment, Ted Kapchuk, he has just an absolutely wonderful definition, which he talks about medical. In his term, he's actually defining as medical ritual, but that's what you were calling contextual effect. Everybody has so many words and terms to describe the same thing, but he's saying medical ritual is everything from the handshake that you get when you come in the door, to the coat that the doctor's wearing, to the smells that you see, to the charts that are on the wall, music that may or may not be playing. Anything. It's a whole medical or social milieu that you arrive in. This isn't at home. You come to the doctor's office, you come to the chiropractor's office, to the massage therapist's office, suddenly immersed in that milieu.
I love that. Make sense? Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's what makes me, what I like about that term is that it applies to everything. Again, placebo can be confused to be a placebo pill, but contextual effects certainly applies to manual therapy, but it can apply to the doctor's office. I was just in the doctor's office the other day, and you feel that you're there, right? That Yep. environment makes you think and act a little bit differently. And what was so great about your book is that it's a discussion of how you can harness the environment, the smell, all of these different elements that you mentioned, how you can harness that for good, and a warning of how that can actually be used I won't say for evil, but in negative ways, which is the nocebo that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Now,
in the end, I would say too that by the time I got towards the end of the book, I didn't really care whether it was called a placebo, whether what I was describing was all placebo effect. I was really interested in anything that was really other than manual. I mean, other than because I don't know what it's like in chiropractic school, but in massage therapy school, it's almost all 99% of our education is. And it turns out that the hands-on part is important, but at least 50% of what's going on is not related to the hands-on stuff. And that's what I became suddenly very, very interested in, is all the other non-manual components that affect therapeutic.
So the article that you send, which I'll include in the show notes, goes through, I think you've got 20 something different types of placebos or factors that go into this. And I want to touch, we won't touch on all of them, but I want to touch on a few because I think they really explain how this can be used. So something you said is the most important thing we can do as therapists, and certainly as a doctor, as a massage therapist, as a chiropractor, is listening.
Yep.
So how is listening a placebo?
Well, once again, I don't know if I want to get into the argument over whether something is actually a placebo or not, but we know for sure that if you listen, and there's lots of studies that support this, but simply listening to your patient can affect therapeutic outcomes. And there's a number of studies that I think they tested. In one case, it was Dr. Martin Bass, a Canadian doctor, and I think it was 2 different studies, but basically what they found, looking at 10 different factors, the most important factor in terms of how this was a subjective outcome, how the client felt they had been, how effective their treatment was whether or not they felt listened to. So, I mean, listening is extremely important. And B, if you've ever looked hard into listening, you quickly realize listening is not a passive. You need to stop and listen, but you also need to echo back and make sure that you are hearing, and that the person hears what you heard and echoes back to say that that's what I heard. And it also sometimes involves questioning them on some of those things. I mean, simply talk therapy is a therapy on its own. So just, chiropractic, you guys have a shorter business model than we do. We have an hour, and I have potentially an hour to listen. I had someone on the table today. I did a lot of listening. Hard. But there is definitely a therapeutic component just in simply listening. And as you know yourself, when it comes to case history taking and everything else, listening is just like gold, because that's where all the information comes out.
And part of it is really giving space and giving time to that patient to allow them to speak. Right?
Yep.
If you ask close-ended questions and boom, one after the other, without allowing them to tell their story, I think is how you describe it. You don't build that relationship, you don't build that trust.
Yep.
And so that, not only gives you more clinical information by listening, but also gives the patient a feeling of being heard and gives them, I think, some more hope that the outcome will be better.
And something that happens in our 2 professions that doesn't necessarily happen in every medical profession is we also have the listening with our hands. I mean, we can feel certain things that other medical professionals don't necessarily hear with their hands.
You mentioned one of these other factors is the use of ritual.
Yeah.
And this is something that I think about a lot, usually about every 4 weeks when I go to get a haircut.
Yeah.
Because to me, that's such a perfect example of how the ritual, the steps that are taken throughout that process make you feel comfortable, make you feel like you expect what's coming. And, I always think it's the littlest things, like the way the barber or the stylist will take that towel and pop it before they tuck it in, if they're going to wash your hair. So just those little things. But I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on how we can use ritual to create that environment, create that effect.
Yeah, like I mean, ritual is a subset of conditioning, and if you look at the traditional looks at the placebo effect, what caused the placebo effect to manifest? I would say there's three basic things. There's expectation, there's conditioning, and then so with expectancy is what is your client expecting to happen. With conditioning, what's their previous conditioning, whether positive or negative, and that comes into play in ritual. And then meaning is a very in everything from listening and a whole host of other things. So under the subset of conditioning, if your patient has lots of previous conditioning with you, that already works in your favor. Or with another chiropractor that you've had patients like that have come in, they in chiropractic, when they it's up to you basically to mess it up. It's your
Right.
game. It's your game to lose. So the challenge is, of course, when people do not have positive conditioning. So and ritual has been used religious ceremony and forward to reinforce all sorts of things. And so it's very, very powerful. And a lot of it is sort of, I would say, is subtle. You don't always think about those things you're saying, but like with the barbershop,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes those things, they're just in the back of your head. And once again, this ties into, as I say, what Ted Kaptchuk has to say about what medical ritual consists of. And on the one hand, ritual sounds like this bizarre thing, but on the other hand, a classic example is give them a glass of water at the end of the massage. That it becomes ritualized.
Mm-hmm.
I have one client where at the end of her massage, I would always give her a bit of distraction. Apparently, I wasn't realize I was doing this like as out of a habit, and then I did said, you didn't pull on my feet. So like I have to make a point with her all the time. And there's a few other little things about her. I have to make sure. And this is the interesting thing about placebo effect. There's no general rule you can sort of say, oh, you need to do this with everybody. No, it has to get tailored to the individual. And I have one person that'll come in here, they want rock music. Someone else wants absolutely relaxation music. Another person wants no singing whatsoever. So those are all rituals that people have come to gotten used to. And the other thing it's interesting about ritual is that people are actually coming to you. This is another sort of a transcendental aspect of ritual. People are, let's say you've given them their remedial exercises, their home exercises, but they've see at home and they're not getting better. They're still coming back to you to get the magic. And what's the magic? Well, it turns out the ritual might be a part of the magic. So they've tried A, B, and C at home, but it's not till they come here and all these components are melded together. The sounds and your confidence, it could be a whole host of things. And all of a sudden, boom, they're able to sort of get somewhere else with their body that they weren't able to get on their own. The third component of ritual, which is very, very interesting, I think, talking to therapists, is that I suggest they consider, and that is take a ritual of just a minute or two before you go into every treatment and just clear yourself so that you're not walking in with the problems from your house or from your kids client or from the bookkeeping or whatever they might happen to be. It's so easy to carry that garbage in with you, but you can just do a little 1 or 2 minute thing, or sorry, not 2 minutes. I mean, we're talking about 10, 15, 20 seconds, sometimes just to clear yourself so that you can. So that's another aspect of ritual that we can use in our positive effect.
Yeah, that's interesting that it's not just ritual for the patient,
Yeah.
but also what we do. And there's a group of chiropractors who do a particular type of adjusting training.
Mm-hmm.
They call themselves the adjusting ninjas, and they have lots of videos online.
Yep.
And this is something that they do. You can see it in their videos for every patient that they go to. They'll stand at the feet, they'll pause, sometimes close their eyes, take a couple of deep breaths before they touch the patient. Right. I think that's an interesting example of it. Which leads me to kind of a question about maybe the ethics of placebo, but these effects don't necessarily rely on the validity of the treatment or the tool that's being used, right?
Yep.
So we know that there's There's good evidence for a lot of treatment tools that we use, and then there's others that we can't explain how they work, and some that the evidence can't even show that it does work from a research perspective. But it's clear in anecdotal experiences from the patients and from the practitioners that there's a change. And so the question kind of is, if it's just that placebo effect that's affecting change, are we really doing anything? And should we be trying to do something that actually has a recognizable effect?
Well, I'd say a few things. If you follow the research in the last, I went to school 20 years ago, and then teachers still seem, maybe they are still the same today, I don't know. They're pretty confident about, we're doing A, B, C, D, or E. Well, it turns out research, a lot of what we thought we were doing, we are not doing. So we've had to start to re-explain a lot of what we do in manual therapy. And there's tons of studies that would suggest that I don't know as much about chiropractic, but massage therapy is not anywhere near as efficacious as we thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
But the experience is efficacious.
Right. I love getting massages.
Yeah. Well, yes, and that good outcomes. It's not necessarily because of when you have to nail down the science. Well, it's not that particular move, and it's not that, and it's not that, and the whole business. It's become a lot more tenuous, at least from what I've seen following manual therapy of the research, is that we are not doing what we thought we were doing, and there's a whole lot more psychosocial components, psychosocial factors that are factoring into the equation, and hence like when I started writing this book, it was about the placebo effect, and like 10 years later, at least everybody within the field that where I am on Facebook, they're talking about the biopsychosocial model, and this is an exploration of the psychological and the social components, and it's not to deny any of the biology, and the biology is important. These other things are coming into play, so I would say what matters is your outcome for sure, but it's just not always going to be that particular thrust or that particular massage therapy move that is doing it. Could be a surprise. It's everything.
Right. And from a mindset of providing value and of providing the most effective care that we can, there's a kind of a move in chiropractic for this specialty called a primary spine practitioner.
Okay.
Right. And so kind of takes the role of a PCP, a GP, but specifically for spine complaints.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And in their training, one of the things is to really minimize the tools that you use. So for instance, E-stim, right, IFC or other electrical modalities don't have great evidence. So we don't use it in the PSP model, right? We really focus more on the biopsychosocial. It's really built around that. And so you really want to use those things that are most shown to be efficacious. And so there's this battle for me because when I go to, get an adjustment, I love those 5-10 minutes when I have some heat on my back in the E-stim.
Ritual.
Right. It's all part of the ritual. And yet, are we, number one, taking, you mentioned another aspect is the locus of control. Are we taking that away from the patient by having them rely on these passive modalities? But then number two, are we relying on something that in itself doesn't work? And so we're just relying on those contextual effects around it. And I battle with myself on kind of the ethics and morality of that.
Well, I hear you. I find it very interesting, sort of, if you're trying to stay on top of things, see the discussions that take place and the battles that take place over certain things. And I don't know. I think I stick with sort of what I said at the very beginning when you're asking me about, where I was headed in life or what I want. Like I refuse to plant. Every time I plant my flag, it turns out, hanging on that ground's a little bit not as solid as I thought it was. And you can sort of say, I am 100% evidence-based, and that's great. And that is absolutely fantastic. But guess what? Intuition is still extremely important. And you can't ignore your evidence and rely on intuition. But on the other hand, if the evidence is saying that intuition saying, you know what, I think I should check out such and such, check it out. I don't know. That's my sense as a practitioner.
I think what I really enjoyed about your book was a discussion of how you can use these contextual effects kind of on top of the evidence-based treatments, right? So not use them in a way necessarily of outright deceiving a patient into thinking you're doing something, but to layer them on top of the most effective treatments that are available.
And I would also say that I'm hoping that, because 100 different sources that I cite in this book, and I read a lot of books on this subject, so I hope what I wrote is evidence-based as well too. It's just that it's more on the psychological and the social aspect than the bio. Everything that I've put forth in the book is based on studies. It's certainly not based on what somebody told me or what my sense is on things.
It really creates a challenge for me, kind of an enjoyable challenge. One of the things I took notes on in your book is the use of reassuring statements.
Right.
So this is trying to give the patients, giving them hope, giving them some expectations that you mentioned, and giving them confidence in you. And so it's the idea of saying, oh, we're going to get you better. But as I was reading the book, it made me realize you don't have to use cliches or empty statements that are just meant to give them a positive feeling. And there's the challenge is to find reassuring statements that are grounded in the evidence.
And I would say the best way I have of phrasing that is err on the side of positive. Always err on the side of positive. Phrase it. And there's a great video that I'm not going to remember the name of the guy who did this, but at any rate, this guy was a U.S. paratrooper, and he'd been dropped a bunch of times, and his knees were just knackered. And and after he was discharged from the Army, himself started getting fatter and fatter and fatter, and he just kind of almost gave up. And he was trying to get some help and whatnot, and basically his story, as he tells the story, it's a great YouTube video, is he finds that every medical professional he says, you're not going to be able to do A, B, C, or D, or E again. And he ends up seeking out Diamond Dallas Page, who's this ex-wrestler who's a teacher type of yoga. And this guy ends up like losing 100 pounds. He ends up running again. He ends up getting his life back again. And he gets his life back again partly because one person said, you can do this. One person didn't limit his own belief system. Stand there and sort of say, you can't do A, B, C, or you're not going to be able to do A, B, or C. So my lesson from that is, as a medical professional, don't be the person who limits someone's belief system.
That's a great video. I've definitely seen that one. And it's certainly motivational.
Yeah.
Yeah. You talk about the kind of the competence of the clinician and being that person who's not the naysayer, who's not negative but very positive, and how that can affect the placebo effect. So there's this idea of the certainty or the confidence of the practitioner. Can that go overboard? I
think it can do, and just power of positive thinking is not enough, because for most of us, we've got all these subconscious routines that are running all the time, and they developed when we were, whatever, from everything up until now, right? So we might be trying to think positive in the front of our mind, and the back of your mind is saying, no, Brian, you can't do it. No, you're a failure, whatever. Mm-hmm. So, and this also touches on how it starts to get out of our scope of as well too. Sometimes we just have to refer someone. If we have someone that is just really immersed in a tremendous amount of negativity, we can give them positive feedback. We can help them try to maybe rewrite their story, but there's a time we might want to say, well, I think you might want to talk to someone about it. And sometimes they people have to have their own internal story rewritten so that they are at least open to positive possibilities. Because, for every one of us, your belief is your only limitation. It's your biggest limitation in life to doing anything.
That's for me at least, that feels like such a fine line to to be positive without giving empty promises.
Yeah, I mean, people are not going to grow the leg back that just got chopped off. I mean, there's things we cannot promise, right? But you know, there are definitely people who do get back to walking, who medical professionals
Right.
say you'll never walk again. So you're right, it is a fine line, and we just have to, I would say, just try and be as positive as we can, and while being realistic.
What are some recommendations you have for practitioners, but certainly students? My main audience, I think, is students. For beginning to learn how to implement this into their practice.
Well, yeah, you've read my book, so you have a sense of what it's about. The first half of the book is sort of more theoretical. I shouldn't say that, but it's an exploration of the history and a whole host of aspects of the placebo effect that I think are quite interesting. Basically, that is interesting. It's like anything in life is okay. That's fine. That's interesting. Where does the rubber hit the road? What does that mean to me in my practice? So the second half of the book, I got very nuts and bolts, with a whole host of things, and I mentioned things like, development, the importance of that, development of expectations, suggestions we can give our clients, examining their belief system and our own belief system, the topic of hope, making sure that they have hope, and looking at conditioning is coming into play. The client's desire is another aspect. Their motivation is slightly different from desire. That's another thing we can explore. There's listening, care, and concern. There's shifting of locus of control, so that is more towards them than ourselves, helping them to get a sense of control over their own situation. Looking at anxiety, if there's anything that's raising their anxiety, to try and lower that. Making sure that we explain things, understand. Explanation is extremely important. Looking at their narrative, what sort of narrative they have, whether they are a hero in their life story or if they are the victim in their own life story. And sometimes we can do feedback to change that. Helping them to if your client is kind of humming and hawing and they don't feel like they're buying into the treatment or into, home care that you've suggested, then we need to sometimes move them from uncertainty to certainty. There's other things I've written about, things like branding, the factor of a new treatment, use of ritual, their compliance, and the environment itself. There's things we can do there sometimes to our clinical environment. Massage therapists were terribly guilty of this, of making their own environment like way too medical enough. Chiropractors, I think, are much better at seeing their environment as a professional environment. And then finally, yourself, sort of realizing that you are actually the placebo yourself. So your own professionalism, your own belief system as a clinician, your confidence, their perception of your competence, and your attire, your enthusiasm, and this is a massive one. Avoiding nocebo language triggers, and I just do almost pretty much like 1 hour seminars just on that, because at the very least, even if you don't even want to buy into the placebo effect, at least please do not trigger the nocebo effect. And if you just can avoid triggering nocebos, and that's not that simple, but is a hell of a start towards, at least moving things in the right direction.
What are some examples of triggering the nocebo effect in your experience with massage, or if you have any experience in ways that chiropractors may be doing that?
I'll just point out a few articles that have been written and studies that have been written on this, and some of the terms that were used. And this is Peter O'Sullivan, Ivan Lynn's paper, and there are messages that can harm patients with nonspecific low back pain. So based on a study that they did, these are the sort of terms that can throw people off. You have degeneration, arthritis, bulged disc disease, or a slip disc. Your back is damaged. Of a 70-year-old. Hopefully you wouldn't say that, but I've literally had clients come in here who've seen another medical professional who said that to them. You've got the back of a 70-year-old. Promote fear, beyond the acute phase. Um, or to say you have to be careful from now on. Take it easy. Your back is weak. So any message that sort of might promote fear or anxiety or not promote confidence, we really need to teach our clients that their spine is strong and their spine is resilient, and it's really, really tough. And this idea that they need to be afraid of it and they need to take care of it and be gentle with it for the rest of their life is not in their benefit. So
in chiropractic, I think one traditional way of explaining things is that your bones have moved out of place, and the evidence is so clear that that's not what happens.
Yes.
But it's such a simple way to explain it. Oh, we're just going to realign your spine. And yet, for some people, that's not a big deal. Oh, okay, great. Let's straighten me out, doc. But for other people, just the idea that their bones have moved creates, like you said, this fear and then this feeling that if any little thing goes wrong, they have to get it fixed. And that really takes that locus of control away.
Absolutely.
As we've been talking, a couple things that have come to mind are, these YouTube videos, the ASMR videos. Have you come across these?
No, tell me about that.
So I used to watch these massage videos, and you get kind of this feeling of relaxation come over you, and that's now known as ASMR, which I believe stands for autonomic sensory meridian response. And now there's all these different videos of massage, of adjusting, of scalp massages, and all these different things. And I think it's a really interesting example of ritual and how that can lead to those effects.
Absolutely.
The calming, the relaxation effects.
I just love it. And they've already been programmed, and they've already, like my work is like, and as you might guess, in massage therapy, sometimes we come into the room and they're already relaxed. I don't know, do you experience that in chiropractic where there's like
I think a lot of people do. A lot of times because chiropractors build that in by doing heat, right? The electrical stim, maybe a roller bed to begin that relaxation. Yeah. You also mentioned branding, and it's funny. I've been watching this Netflix show called Chef's Table, and I think it's also an interesting example of this contextual effect, where there are these high-end restaurants where the head chef, has a profile done on them, and they put everything they can into creativity, and every little thing throughout the restaurant is just so. Clean white linen, the ambiance and everything. And as I watch this, I think, their food doesn't really cost that much. It's not the food that they're paying for. It's the whole experience. And I think that's, to me, that puts into context this idea of contextual effects and how we can apply that.
Is very closely related to that is when I started out my career, I was working in a spa, and I was also working in my own clinical environment. In the spa, they were charging twice as much as what I charge. And when you're in a spa, there's a hot tub, sauna, and steam rooms, and there's all the amenities of the spa. People arrive in their robe, they're already kind of relaxed, so it's a whole environment and ambiance. And I got to tell you, like in that first year, I just found it so interesting, and I had people say to me, "It's the best massage of my life," and it's the exact same massage that I was giving other people for half the price. And that is a component of the placebo effect as well, too, right? Perceived value and whatnot. So as people pay more for things, they do expect that it will actually affect larger effects. So you're right; it is very, very interesting, and it's all context.
Well, the whole idea is fascinating. Again, for the listeners, the book is The Placebo Effect in Manual Therapy, Improving Clinical Outcomes in Your Practice. Again, published by Handspring Publishing. You can find it on Amazon. I believe, is there an ebook?
Yes, on Amazon you can get the ebook.
So for those like me as a student who don't have space for more textbooks on the shelves, the ebook would be a great option. And links to all the things that we've discussed will be in the show notes. Brian, anywhere you'd like people to follow you if they'd like to learn more about your work?
Um, on Facebook, there is a group, Placebo Effects in Manual Therapy. That's probably the best way to sort of touch on me. I have a professional Facebook page, but it has more to do with therapy and just general health, and not really so much about the placebo effect. I do on my website, there are actually, fultonmassagetherapy.com. If they click under practitioners on that, they will see some articles that I've written there, and website's sort of being worked over right now, but eventually there probably will be some. I would like to develop some more, put some more material up there as well too. Yeah, so
Great. I'll
fultonmassagetherapy.com.
link to that and share it with everyone else. Well, it's been a great discussion. I wish we could continue.
Yeah, thanks so much for your interest in it, Nathan. I appreciate you taking the time, and I find it's the first time I've actually done a podcast. I've done lots of webinars and I've done seminars. Podcast is a totally different animal. It's kind of interesting because like that or that, but that's okay. I just hammered through a few things, and it's an interesting experience.
You mentioned
for me.
you've done some CE courses. Are there any available online?
It's a good point. There's one that's being developed by elearning.com. They are currently developing something. That's the only one that I know of. I did a webinar with them, which I think it had CE units, but this is an actual course they're developing, but it has not. I've done all the recording for it, but they haven't yet gotten back to me with a finished product. But
well, keep an eye out for that. Do you have anywhere listed where you teach seminars? Any upcoming?
No, because I'm really flying by the seat of my pants. I'm going to be at the National Health Practitioners of Canada in May of this year. So I've got a presentation there in May 27th, I think, 26th, on the placebo effect. But nothing else coming up at the moment. But thanks for.
Yeah, well, we'll keep an eye out. Please post that in the group or on your Facebook page in case people want to follow and meet up with you the next time you do a seminar.
Okay.
Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Exploring Chiropractic. If you're watching this on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button down below as well as the like button and leave me some comments. I will be posting some videos about product reviews as well as my thoughts on best ways to study, ideas around chiropractic that we should be thinking about. So please stay tuned. If you're listening to the podcast via Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, please head on over to leave a review and drop a few stars for me and give me your feedback. You can always reach out at Exploring Chiro on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok, and send me an email, contact@exploringchiropractic.com. All of the show notes are available in the notes below, whether you're watching on YouTube or in the podcast app, and you can go to exploringchiropractic.com. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you again in the next episode.